She dumped me twice, now she wants a third chance. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd get dumped twice by the same girl, let alone be staring down the possibility of a third time. But here I was, sitting in my car outside her apartment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, my stomach twisting into a knot I couldn't untangle. Her name was Emily. The first time I saw her, she was walking into our freshman English class wearing this oversized hoodie and ripped jeans, her blonde hair tied up in a messy bun. She had this way of looking through people, like she already knew what you were about before you even opened your mouth. She was different. She had that energy, that confidence, that kind of effortless presence that made everyone around her pay attention. And me. I was just some guy who sat in the back row, barely noticeable, not the kind of guy who got girls like her. But somehow I did. It started with a project. We got paired together for some dumb poetry analysis thing. I remember how she'd chew on the end of her pen when she was thinking, and how she had this habit of tapping her foot under the desk when she got impatient. We bonded over bad poetry and late-night texts, and before I knew it, she was in my life in a way I never saw coming, and just like that, I was hers. It felt real. It felt like something that could last until it didn't. The first time she dumped me, it was a Friday. I remember because I had just bought concert tickets for us and I was so damn excited to surprise her. But when I met her after class, she wouldn't even look at me. She just sighed, crossed her arms, and said, "I think we need to break up." Just like that, no explanation, no warning, nothing. I remember laughing because it didn't make sense. "What?" I said, still holding the tickets in my hand. "Are you joking?" She was. She said she needed space, that she wasn't ready for something serious, that she felt like she was suffocating. But what hurt the most was how easily she walked away, like I was just some phase she'd grown out of, like I hadn't meant anything at all. I spent weeks trying to make sense of it, trying to move on, trying to convince myself that she wasn't coming back. And then 3 months later, she did. I remember the exact moment. It was late at night and I was lying in bed, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I saw her name pop up on my screen. My heart nearly stopped. I hesitated before opening the message, half expecting it to be some accidental text, some cruel joke. But it was. It was a simple, "Hey, can we talk?" I should have ignored it. I should have let her go, but I didn't. We met up at this little coffee shop downtown. She looked different, a little softer, a little less guarded. She told me she made a mistake, that she'd been scared, that she'd pushed me away because she wasn't ready, but now she was. And like an idiot, I believed her. I let her back in. For a while it was good, maybe even better than before. She seemed more present, more committed, and I let myself hope. But deep down, there was always this nagging fear, this voice in the back of my mind whispering that it was only a matter of time before she changed her mind again. And sure enough, she did. The second time she dumped me, it was even worse, because this time I saw it coming. She started pulling away again, canceling plans, taking longer to respond to my texts, acting distant like she was already halfway out the door. I asked her about it, but she just shrugged it off. "I'm just stressed," she'd say. "Things are just a lot right now." But I knew better. I could feel it slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. When she finally ended things, she didn't even try to sugarcoat it. "I don't think this is working anymore," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. And that was it again. This time I told myself I wouldn't let her back in, that I'd learned my lesson, that I wasn't going to be some revolving door for her to walk through whenever she felt like it. But then a year later, she messaged me again. And now here I was, sitting in my car, staring at her apartment door, knowing damn well I was about to make the same mistake all over again. I hesitated before knocking this time. The first 2 times I had walked back into her life too quickly, too willingly. But now, standing here again, I could feel the weight of my past mistakes pressing down on me. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a second, and then knocked. The door swung open faster than I expected. Emily stood there, her blue eyes wide, her lips slightly parted like she hadn't actually expected me to come. "Hey," she said softly, shifting awkwardly on her feet. "Hey," I replied, stuffing my hands into my jacket pockets. I didn't want her to see how shaky they were. She stepped aside. "Come in." The moment I walked in, it felt like stepping into a time machine. The scent of vanilla candles still lingered in the air, the same coffee mug sat on the counter, and her old, faded hoodie was draped over the couch, just like before. I exhaled sharply, trying to push down the flood of memories. She watched me, biting her lip. "I know this is probably weird." "Yeah," I admitted, turning to face her. "A little." She exhaled and crossed her arms. I just wanted to talk." "Talk about what, Emily?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated before meeting my gaze. "About us, about everything." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "That's a lot to unpack." "I know," she whispered, "but I've had a lot of time to think, and I realized I was wrong about everything." I stared at her, searching for the catch, because with Emily there was always a catch. "And what exactly do you want from me?" She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "I want a third chance." My heart clenched at her words, but my mind screamed at me to turn around and walk out the door. This was the moment. This was the decision that would either make or break me all over again. And for once, I didn't know what to do. I don't know why I let myself step back into her world. Maybe it was nostalgia, maybe it was hope, or maybe I was just a fool who never learned. As I stood in her apartment, feeling the same mix of comfort and unease, I knew this was the moment where everything would either fall back into place or completely fall apart again. Emily poured 2 cups of tea, her hands shaking slightly as she handed me one. "I meant what I said," she whispered, sitting down on the couch. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I want one. I studied her, trying to read between the lines, trying to see if this was real or if she'd just end up walking away again when things got too real. You don't get to just say that and expect everything to be okay, I said, my voice calm but firm. She nodded, looking down at the tea in her hands. I know, but I want to prove it. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. How do you prove something like that, Emily? You don't get to just say you've changed. You've done that before. Because I'm here now, I came back, didn't I? I didn't have to, but I did. Her voice was small, but there was something raw in it. I shook my head. You didn't have to leave in the first place. Silence hung between us. The weight of all our past mistakes sat between us like an invisible wall, one I wasn't sure I was ready to break down again. She took a deep breath. Let me show you, let me earn it, one day at a time. I stared at her, my heart screaming one thing and my brain another. And in that moment, I had to decide, hold on to the past or take a risk on a future that could shatter me all over again. I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't walking away. Not yet. I sat across from her, my fingers gripping the edge of the table as if it could somehow ground me. Emily's eyes held something different this time, something deeper, something real. Or at least I wanted to believe that. She had hurt me twice before, and yet here I was, entertaining the idea of letting her back in. The air between us felt thick, loaded with the weight of unspoken words. I knew that whatever decision I made tonight would define everything that came next. And yet I still hesitated, caught between the past and the possibility of a future. Emily sighed, rubbing her hands together as if trying to warm them. I know you don't trust me, she said quietly, and I don't blame you. Her voice wavered, but she held my gaze, refusing to let me look away. I wanted to tell her she was right, that trust wasn't something you could demand, especially after breaking it twice. But I also knew I wasn't ready to let go, not completely. There was still something inside me that clung to the memory of who we were before everything fell apart. He leaned forward slightly. I've been in therapy, she admitted. I've been working through everything. Why I run when things get hard, why I hurt the people I care about. Her voice cracked at the last part, and for a moment I saw the vulnerability she had always tried to hide. It was strange, seeing her like this, stripped of her usual confidence, admitting to her faults instead of pretending they didn't exist. It made me want to believe her, even if logic told me not to. I don't know, Emily, I said finally. It's not just about words, it's about actions. She nodded, swallowing hard. I know, and I'm not asking you to just forget everything. I want a chance to show you that I've changed, that I won't do it again. Her voice was barely above a whisper, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her that I hadn't seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear that she might have lost me for good. I let out a slow breath, leaning back in my chair. Then prove it. Emily's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to say that. But then she nodded, determination settling over her. I will. As I watched her, I realized something. I wanted to believe her. Maybe that was enough. Had thought making the decision to let Emily back in was the hardest part. But I was wrong. The real challenge was waking up every day and wondering if I had made a mistake. Every small moment felt magnified, every hesitation in her voice, every unread message. It all became evidence in the trial that was constantly running in my mind. Was I just setting myself up for another heartbreak, or was this the time things would actually be different? Emily, for her part, was trying. She sent me good morning texts, asked about my day, and even made an effort to be consistent. But consistency wasn't enough to erase the past. My heart had been broken twice, and no amount of well-placed affection could patch up the cracks left behind. Every time she touched my hand, I felt warmth. But I also felt the memory of the cold silence she had left me with before. Trust was supposed to be something you built over time, but with her, it felt like walking on a tightrope. One wrong step and I'd be tumbling down again. I wanted to believe that she was different now, but a part of me still held on to the fear that one day I'd wake up and she'd be gone like before. It wasn't fair, to her, to me, but it was the reality I lived in now. She could sense it. She knew I was holding back, but she didn't push. I get it, she said one evening when we were sitting on her couch, the glow of the television flickering against the walls. I don't expect you to just trust me overnight, but I hope one day you will. Her words settled deep in my chest. Hope. That was all I had now, wasn't it? A fragile, dangerous thing, but sometimes hope was the only thing that kept you moving forward. It was strange how silence could feel so loud. Sitting across from Emily, I felt the weight of everything we had been through pressing against my chest like a heavy stone. The past clung to us, an invisible force neither of us could ignore. She sipped her tea, her fingers wrapped tightly around the cup as if she were afraid it might slip through her grasp. I wondered if that was how she felt about us. Something warm but fragile, something that could disappear in an instant if she held on too tightly. Every moment with her felt like a test, like I was waiting for the first crack to appear. She had promised she was different this time, that she wouldn't run again. But how many times had I heard those words before? Promises, I had learned, were easy to make but much harder to keep. Still, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could rewrite our story, that this time we would make it to the final chapter instead of ending midway through the book. She reached across the table and touched my hand. It was a small gesture, but it sent shockwaves through me. I know I have a lot to prove, she said softly. Her voice was careful, measured, like she was choosing each word with precision. And I know I've hurt you more than once, but I don't want to hurt you again. I sighed, staring down at our hands. Emily, I don't know if I can go through this again. The words were out before I could stop them, and I saw the flicker of pain cross her face. It was the truth, though. Loving her felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure if I'd be caught if I fell. She didn't pull away. Then let me show you, she whispered. Let me prove it to you. But how could she? How do you prove to someone that history won't repeat itself when the past is all they can see? I wanted to say yes, to give her the answer she was waiting for, but my heart was still bruised, still raw from the times she had walked away before. There was no roadmap for this, no guide on how to love someone who had hurt you and still held your heart in their hands. Days passed, each one filled with tentative steps forward and quiet moments of doubt. She tried, and I saw it. She showed up, she was consistent, she didn't pull away when things got hard. And yet, part of me was still waiting for the inevitable goodbye. Was that fair to her? Probably not. But it was the only way I knew how to protect myself. One evening, we found ourselves walking through the park, the cool night air wrapping around us. She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Do you think we'll ever get back to the way we were?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought about it, about the laughter, the effortless way we used to fit together before everything fell apart. But time had changed us. Pain had shaped us into something different. "I don't think we're supposed to go back," I finally said. "I think we have to build something new." She nodded, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before, understanding. Maybe she finally realized that love wasn't about pretending the past didn't exist. It was about choosing to move forward despite it. As we stood there beneath the streetlights, the city humming softly around us, I knew that I had a choice to make. I could let my fear win, let it pull me away from her one last time. Or I could take a chance, let go of the past, and see if we could create something better than what we had before. I didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time in a long time, I wanted to try. Time has a funny way of softening even the sharpest memories. The sting of Emily's past goodbyes had dulled, replaced by something else, something quieter, more uncertain. But uncertainty wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It meant that possibilities still existed. And so, as we sat across from each other in that little cafe, I found myself wondering if maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. She reached for my hand, fingers tentative, as if expecting me to pull away. I didn't. I let her hold on, let her presence ground me in the moment. "I know I've messed up," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I love you and I don't want to lose you again." Love, that word had once felt unshakable between us, something that tethered us together despite everything. But love alone hadn't been enough before. Would it be now? I didn't know. I wasn't sure I could afford to be naive again. I studied her, searching for any sign of hesitation. The old Emily had always left before things got hard. The Emily in front of me now, though, was waiting, staying, even when she didn't have to. That meant something. Maybe not everything, but something. The past had always been our shadow, looming over us, reminding me of every painful moment when she had walked away. But shadows only existed when there was light, and maybe, just maybe, there was still light between us. I wanted to find out. "I don't want to lose you either," I admitted. It was the closest thing to a confession I could give her. Not yet an agreement, but not a refusal either. She squeezed my hand, hope flickering in her eyes. Weeks passed, and little by little I let my guard down. We took things slowly, relearning each other in ways that didn't rush toward a doomed ending. I watched for the warning signs, but they never came. She was different, or maybe we both were. Maybe pain had shaped us into something stronger. One evening, we sat together on my apartment balcony, the city stretching out beneath us. She leaned her head against my shoulder, sighing. "Do you think we'll make it?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took in the moment, the steady rhythm of her breath, the quiet hum of life moving around us. And then, finally, I spoke. "I think we already are." For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing myself for an ending. Maybe that was what love really was. Not certainty, not perfection, but the choice to keep trying. And as she laced her fingers through mine, I knew that, for the first time, I was willing to try.